Imagine a nation that rose at sunrise and vanished by sunset. A country born in the shadow of empires, daring to declare independence and erased from the map before the day was done. This is Carpatho-Ukraine, a land of mountains, brave volunteers, and a fleeting dream of freedom. For one incredible day, people raised their flag, sang their anthem, and believed in the impossible. But history had other plans. Invaders descended, dreams collided with reality, and a nation disappeared, almost as if it had never existed. In this video, we'll uncover the breathtaking story of courage, heartbreak, and a legacy that outlived its 24-hour existence. From the rise of hope to the crushing defeat, every moment will grip you, thrill you, and make you question, what would you do if your country vanished overnight? If you love history, mysteries, and untold stories, hit that like button, drop a comment, and subscribe, because this one-day nation is about to reveal secrets you won't believe. High in the Carpathian Mountains, on the rugged edge of Europe, lay a land few in the outside world even knew existed. Tucked between Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Poland, and later the growing shadow of Nazi Germany, it was a place defined by its borders, and by the fact that those borders kept changing. This was Carpatho-Ukraine, a region that had always been more prize than power, more pawn than player. To most world leaders, it was a forgotten corner of the map. But to the people who lived there, mostly Ruthenians, a branch of the Ukrainian people, it was home and it was theirs. For centuries, they had been ruled by others. First the Austro-Hungarian Empire, later the newly formed Czechoslovakia after World War I, Carpatho-Ukraine was never asked what it wanted. Its people were shepherded by foreign governments, taxed, drafted, ordered, and dismissed. They spoke their language in private, but were told in schools and offices to use someone else's. They prayed in their own churches, but answered to rulers far away in Prague, Vienna, or Budapest. To outsiders, they were peasants of the hills, simple farmers, woodcutters, shepherds. But under the surface, a slow fire smoldered, the dream that one day this little land might stand on its own. The 1930s brought change and chaos. Across Europe, borders were cracking and old empires were falling apart. Hitler's rise in Germany sent shockwaves through the continent. Poland was bracing for invasion. Hungary was hungry for lost lands. And Czechoslovakia, the country that had governed Carpatho-Ukraine since World War I, was itself splitting apart under the pressure of Nazi threats. It was a dangerous, shifting world where small nations either found their voice or were swallowed whole. And in those mountains, that dream of self-rule grew louder. Teachers whispered to students about Ukrainian heritage. Newspapers carried quiet calls for autonomy. And in taverns and churches, people began to say aloud what had once been unthinkable. What if we were free? What if Carpatho-Ukraine was its own nation? Most of the world wasn't paying attention. To diplomats in London, Paris, or Washington, this was a minor province with little significance. But to the people there, history was about to give them a chance. And though the opportunity would be fleeting, so brief it would vanish in the span of a single day, it would be enough for them to raise a flag, declare their independence, and shout to the world, "We exist." This was the beginning of Carpatho-Ukraine's story, a forgotten land, perched in the mountains, about to take its first and only breath of independence. March 1939. Europe was teetering on the edge of catastrophe. Hitler's Germany had already torn chunks out of Czechoslovakia, and the fragile republic was splintering under the weight of Nazi pressure. Amid this chaos, in the misty valleys and peaks of the Carpathians, a tiny voice prepared to rise above the roar of collapsing empires. For the people of Carpatho-Ukraine, this was the moment they had been waiting for, the sliver of history when their dream could finally become reality. At the heart of this dream was a man named Augustin Voloshin. A priest by calling and a professor by trade, Voloshin was no soldier, no general. But he carried within him the hopes of a people long ignored. When Prague's grip loosened and chaos consumed the land, Voloshin acted. On March 15, 1939, he declared the independence of Carpatho-Ukraine. For the first time in history, this rugged mountain land was not just a province or a pawn, it was a country. The declaration swept like wildfire through villages and towns. Church bells rang, school children raised a new blue and yellow flag, and farmers who had spent generations under foreign rulers suddenly felt pride swell in their chests. The nation even had its own army, though army was perhaps too generous a word. Volunteers, many of them teachers, students, and peasants, armed with whatever rifles or weapons they could find. They weren't trained soldiers, but they were fueled by something stronger: belief. For one shining day, Carpatho-Ukraine lived as a sovereign state. Its government convened, its anthem was sung, and its leaders spoke words of freedom that echoed across the valleys. Imagine it. Centuries of subjugation, centuries of silence shattered in the space of a sunrise. Against the backdrop of Europe's growing darkness, this tiny nation lit a candle of hope. But deep down, everyone knew the danger. Independence was a declaration not just of identity, but of defiance. Defiance against Hungary, which craved the land, and against Nazi Germany, which had already shown it would crush anyone in its path. Still, for that one day, fear was pushed aside by euphoria. After centuries of being overlooked, Carpatho-Ukraine stood proud, if only for a moment. And here's where history grips you. Think about it. A nation born in the morning, already under threat by noon and facing destruction before the sun even set. What would it feel like to live through that day, to watch your country rise and know in your heart it may not survive the night? That's the haunting power of Carpatho-Ukraine's story. And if you're drawn in by this tale of fleeting freedom, fragile hope, and the courage of a people who dared to dream, then hit that like button, drop your thoughts in the comments, and make sure to subscribe, because the storm that came next would test this newborn nation in the harshest way imaginable. The morning of March 15, 1939, dawned bright over the Carpathians. But beneath that serene light, tension coiled like a spring. Carpatho-Ukraine had declared independence, raised its flag, and briefly tasted the sweetness of sovereignty. But the moment was fragile, razor thin. Across the borders, Hungary was watching, and its patience had run out. With Hitler's tacit blessing, Hungarian troops surged toward the fledgling nation, determined to crush its bold experiment in self-rule. Carpatho-Ukraine's defenders were brave, but unprepared. Volunteers, teachers, farmers, students took up rifles, pitchforks, and whatever weapons they could find. They had no experience in modern warfare, no armor, no heavy artillery. Yet they had heart. Mountain passes echoed with hurried plans, whispered prayers, and the steady resolve of people fighting for something more than land. Fighting for their identity, their families, and a glimpse of freedom. The invasion was swift and merciless. Hungarian soldiers poured over the borders, moving with the precision of a well-drilled army. Skirmishes erupted in villages, along rivers, and in the valleys between jagged peaks. Carpatho-Ukraine's defenders fought with desperate courage, ambushing columns of troops in narrow passes, firing from hidden positions, and vanishing into the forests. For hours, hope seemed to flicker. Maybe the mountains themselves could protect them. But the odds were impossible. By the afternoon, Hungarian forces had cut through key defensive positions. Supplies ran low, reinforcements never came, and the volunteers, tired, scared, and outnumbered, were pushed back. Villages burned as invaders advanced, flags were torn down, and the bright dream of independence began to crumble. Families fled into the mountains, carrying only what they could hold, leaving homes, schools, and churches behind. By nightfall, the truth was undeniable. Carpatho-Ukraine's independence had lasted less than a single sunrise to sunset. Its brief moment of glory was extinguished before the stars even blinked. Hungary had taken control, and the people who had dared to dream were once again under foreign rule. The mountains that had witnessed centuries of oppression now watched the swift fall of a nation in a single day. Yet even in defeat, the courage of Carpatho-Ukraine's people left a mark. Their flag had flown, their anthem had been sung, and their message had been sent. Even the smallest nation can dream, even if the world around it doesn't notice. And while the country vanished from maps overnight, its story survived in whispers, in memories, and in the courage of those who had lived its brief independence. As the sun set over the Carpathian peaks, the fledgling nation of Carpatho-Ukraine ceased to exist. One day, one sunrise to sunset, and it was gone. The Hungarian forces had moved swiftly, crushing resistance, tearing down flags, and reinstating foreign rule. Streets that had rung with the voices of children singing their new anthem were now eerily silent. The dreams of a free people were reduced to whispers among the mountains. For the international community, Carpatho-Ukraine was barely a footnote. Newspapers in Paris, London, and New York reported it with a sentence or two, buried deep within stories of Hitler's growing aggression. To diplomats and generals, it was inconsequential, a tiny borderland erased before it could make a mark. The world had bigger crises, and the tiny Carpatho-Ukrainian experiment was quickly forgotten. But for the people on the ground, history had delivered a harsh and immediate lesson. Independence was fragile, fleeting, and easily crushed by forces far greater than their own. President Avgustin Voloshin, the man who had dared to raise a nation, fled into exile, carrying with him the hopes of his people. Many leaders were captured, imprisoned, or worse. Families who had celebrated independence at dawn were now forced to navigate a terrifying reality, living under the shadow of a foreign army. Villages that had hoisted the blue and yellow flag were stripped of it, replaced by symbols of domination. The mountains themselves, silent witnesses to centuries of oppression, now bore the scars of a freedom that had vanished in a single day. Yet the story of Carpatho-Ukraine did not disappear entirely. In the mountains, elders recounted the events of that one extraordinary day to their children. They spoke of courage, of volunteers standing against professional armies, and of a fleeting taste of sovereignty that no invader could erase from memory. The nation may have vanished from maps, but it endured in the hearts and stories of its people. This erasure, however, was not just physical, it was psychological. It sent a chilling message to small nations everywhere: assert independence at your own risk. The tale of Carpatho-Ukraine became a cautionary whisper in European political circles and a haunting memory for those who had dared to hope. It was a reminder that while borders can be redrawn overnight, the human desire for freedom cannot be so easily extinguished. If this story of courage, loss, and erasure resonates with you, hit that like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe, because the final chapter will reveal the enduring legacy of a country that lived for only a day but left a mark that history could never erase. Though Carpatho-Ukraine existed for only a single day, its story reverberated far beyond the mountains where it briefly raised its flag. That one sunrise to sunset independence became a symbol of courage, a testament to the enduring human desire for freedom, no matter how fleeting. For the people who lived through it, the memory of that day was seared into their hearts. The day they dared to stand as a nation, to assert their identity, and to dream of sovereignty even under the shadow of powerful neighbors. The legacy of Carpatho-Ukraine is not measured in years, but in the depth of its impact. For Ukrainians and Ruthenians, it represents a spark of national identity, proof that even the smallest and most overlooked communities can claim their moment of agency in history. Every flag that was raised, every proclamation read, every volunteer who took up arms, even knowing the odds, embodied a defiance that could not be erased by an invading army or indifferent world powers. Beyond its people, Carpatho-Ukraine left lessons for historians, scholars, and anyone who studies the fragility of nations. It is a case study in how geopolitical forces can crush fledgling independence, but also in how courage can endure even when borders and governments change overnight. The documents, photographs, and diaries that survived became more than historical artifacts. They became touchstones for a story that refuses to be forgotten, a story of hope and audacity in the face of impossible odds. The one-day nation also echoes as a cautionary tale. It reminds the world that freedom is fragile, especially for small nations caught between empires and aggressive neighbors. Yet, paradoxically, it also proves that even the briefest assertion of sovereignty can inspire generations. Oral histories, songs, and family memories have kept the spirit of Carpatho-Ukraine alive. Though erased from maps, the mountains remember, the people remember, and those who study it remember. Carpatho-Ukraine's fleeting existence became immortal not because it endured, but because it dared. Its story illustrates a profound truth. The courage to claim one's place in the world, even for a single day, can leave an imprint that outlives armies, borders, and time itself. One day in history became a lifetime of inspiration, a reminder that the impact of a nation is measured not just in longevity, but in the bravery of its people and the strength of their dreams. Carpatho-Ukraine may have existed for only a single day, but its story echoes through history. One sunrise, one flag, one anthem, and then it was gone, erased by invaders and forgotten by the world. Yet the bravery of its people, the courage to dream of freedom, and the fleeting taste of independence live on in memory and legend. This tiny nation proves that even the shortest-lived countries can leave the longest-lasting impact. Their story reminds us that courage, hope, and identity can never be fully erased, no matter how brief the moment. If this story of a one-day nation gripped you, smash that like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe, because there are countless more forgotten nations, untold histories, and shocking stories waiting to be uncovered, and you won't want to miss them.